Hi there, welcome back to Kingdom Breakthrough in Joshua chapter 10. We've had the amazing victory of Joshua and the Israelite army, and of course the hailstorm from God over the Amorite armies in opposition to the people of Gibeon in chapter 10. And then in verse 12, it says this: On the day the Lord gave the Israelites victory over the Amorites, Joshua prayed to the Lord in front of all the people of Israel. This is a brave thing to do in front of people. He said, "Let the sun stand still over Gibeon and the moon over the valley of Ajalon." And so the sun stood still and the moon stayed in place until the nation of Israel had defeated its enemies. So there was light all that time. Is this event not recorded in the book of Ishtar? The sun stayed in the middle of the sky and did not set as on a normal day. Reminds me of that account, of course, in the New Testament, where Jesus is crossing the lake and the storm rises and he just says, "Peace, be still." And the disciples' reaction to that is, well, even the wind and the waves obey him. Even the sun and the moon, in this account in Joshua chapter 10, they follow through as an answer to prayer to the faith step, the huge faith step that Joshua has taken. See, God is able to do immeasurably more. We often quote, don't we, Ephesians 3:20, the immeasurably more, the exceedingly abundantly in the Authorized Version. That God's able to go way beyond all that we face and all that we're challenged with. And yet, we pay lip service to that, but so often don't really believe it. And so God's heart to us today says, look, goes beyond what you are facing at the minute. I want to be on that. I want to say, this is even greater than you realize. What I can do is bigger than your wildest dreams. And sometimes God wants us to take a step of faith. Joshua, he had to really know, didn't he, that God was going to come through. And I think, as well as this idea of even the sun and the moon's being used by God to validate the leadership of Joshua in this particular situation, there's this question: how much are we prepared to step out in faith like that? I remember when I was first started to look to God to do miraculous things when I was preaching. And I don't mean the miracle of people staying awake, just in case you're thinking that. But stepping out and asking God for words for particular people. And this would often happen at the end of the service, and I'd stand there and I'd put the lectern out of the way and I'd just say, let's just wait on God, see what he wants to do. See, in one sense, that is an incredibly vulnerable thing to do, because you can look at an absolute Charlie, can't you? You can stand there hoping and believing and trusting that God is going to show up. And if he doesn't, you look like an idiot. But thankfully, as we step out in faith, we realize that God wants to show up more and more and more. And then God would give words of knowledge or words of wisdom or particular indicators of how he wanted to touch someone or encourage them or to heal their body. And we would step out in faith and we would pray for that healing. We would pray for that breakthrough. We would pray for that restoration of relationship, or whatever the situation was, and we would see God come through again and again and again. And God wants us to be people in these days who will take risks for him. He wants us to be people who will say, I believe this is what God has said. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to put my whole situation on the line, because if God doesn't show up, I'm going to feel perhaps very silly, or I'm going to have some serious consequences in my own personal life. And yet I believe God has called me, therefore I'm going to do it. Are you a person who's going to be willing to stand up and say to God, God, in all that I am facing, I'm trusting you, because there is no one else who can get me out of this muddle? Joshua prayed. God showed up. And the rest is history.